Hey, Jana Lane here. I am going to talk you through a couple of really great tools that I use in my class to assess students. Quizzes is something you can use for formative or summative assessment, and my colleague and I have created quizzes for all of our economics standards, and we share them with each other, which is really great. When you create a quizzes, you have two ways to administer it. You can do it live, where students will get the information that they need, they'll put in, and they'll put in a code, they'll start the quizzes, and then you can actually go over the answers. It'll show you your most missed questions. You can go over that and you can show your top 5 students. Another way to do that is to assign homework. So I often do this. I will assign it to my Google Classroom, or you can use a generated link. So you can share a link or assign it to your classroom. And I often assign this as an optional practice for a test, or sometimes a required homework to review. You can create your own quizzes using question banks that have already been created. So you can create a new question and type it in, or you can search, and you can search by standard, which is really great. So it'll use the title of your assessment as a search. But if I'm looking for a particular standard, those are typically already put in by teachers. And so if I look up a standard, I'll see quizzes come up with that standard and that information in it. I can add those to my quiz, or I can use these as a jumping off point for creating my own questions. So quizzes are really easy to create. And one of the things I really like to do is to create a quiz that's very small, 5 to 10 questions, to remediate a particular student over a particular standard. So if I see that a student is really struggling with a standard in my class, I will create a short quiz about the standard, about production possibilities curves. That student can practice with that standard in a very low pressure environment. So that's really popular with my students. It's very easy. You have reports that you can look at to see how students are doing. So it gives you a lot of feedback class wide. And of course, they're happy to sell you a super account. I don't have a super account here in quizzes. You could give this as a test, but I wouldn't really recommend it because these question banks are so used and reused by so many teachers that it's pretty easy to look up in other quizzes, find the similar questions, and cheat if that's something that a student chooses to do. The second topic I'm going to talk about is Google Forms. We have a testing program now at my school, but in the meantime, Google Forms was a great program for me. You can use Google Forms to create question rubrics, and I really like this for my AP exams. I actually have students answer on paper, but I copy and paste the rubrics in here, and then I put the student's email address, and I have an add-on for Google Forms that is an email notifications add-on, and it costs a little bit of money to add, like $2 or $3 to buy it for life. And I can create an email notification to go with this form that will email my students, and so they can actually see exactly what they missed on this item. So they'll see what they missed. They get the email that shows what their grades were, what questions were missed. And then when you go to responses here, you can see a table. If you click on this, it will actually create a table of students and their answers. So I can see what was missed by which students. And I can run averages to see what questions were most missed. So this question averaged out pretty well, for example, but you can see that the average is much lower here on the next question. So this shows me what I need to remediate with my class. Students did really great here and not as well on some future things. So the Google form is really great, and you can use some data tools to kind of help you understand. I create subtotals. I can see all sorts of things here, averages. So I do a lot of work with Google Forms as a rubric creator. But having students work with Google Forms is really great. So I've created questions and answers. You can do short answer text. You can add information. You can use it as a quiz here with the settings. If you create the answer as a quiz, you can then release the grade. Students can see missed questions, correct answers, and point values. And one thing I would really caution you about, if you turn it to a quiz that always collects emails, you have a lock mode on Chromebooks, particularly through your organization. But if you're not using that quiz functionality, make sure you're collecting emails on your students. You can restrict it to your schools. If your school has an account, you can limit to one response. You can change it so students can edit after submit if you are doing this over multiple days. Sometimes they can see some summary charts. So those are lots of features that you can use. But if you don't have something to collect the student's name, collecting that email address can be really helpful, because I can't tell you how many times I've set up a Google form, forgotten to collect an email address, and then not knowing who answered what. And so that can be a huge problem. Another thing that you can do in Google Forms that I really like is that you can go to a section based on an answer. So for example, if the student gets the answer right, you might skip to another section. And if the student gets the answer wrong, you can actually add an item here. So I can add a video right here. So if a student misses the question, they would go on, or they could go to the next section that you have. So if they get it correct, they move on to the next section. If not, they would go to the next question, and they would have this remediation video that they could watch. So here, just creating that. And I really love that functionality, again, because it builds remediation right into a quiz, creating something that might be a summative assessment that also becomes a formative assessment as well. So if you have access to both quizzes and Google Forms, the question is, which one should you use? And my answer here is, it depends on what you want to do. If you want a brief, very informal review with your class that can be gamified and gives you immediate feedback that the whole class can see, or you want to create something small with a pre-built quiz library, Quizzes is the way to go. The benefit, though, that Google Forms has that Quizzes does not is security. So you can lock your stuff down so that students are locked on a Chromebook if your school has Chromebooks. So you can lock your quiz down on a Chromebook with a locked browser element that Google Forms offers that Quizzes does not. Also, I find Google Forms to be much more versatile. So not only can you use it for quizzes, but you can use it for surveys. I use it to keep up with my parent contact logs. I use it to give rubric feedback to students. So this has a lot more applications outside of just a pure assessment, a lot of data gathering operations, where Quizzes does a great job with formative assessment but isn't quite as good as summative assessment. Those are the two tools that I really use frequently to assess my students informally, and they also can be used for more formal assessments or summative assessments if you so choose. Hope this helps, and as I say on my economics videos, anytime you're making a choice, you're using economics.